apartment I moved into after my divorce was too quiet. Not quiet in a peaceful way. Quiet in the way that empty rooms are quiet. A silence that amplifies things instead of absorbing them. And consistently, somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, I would wake up. Not from a nightmare. Not because of noise. Just awake. Heart rate slightly elevated. The room dark and still. And something in that silence that hadn't been there during the day. I didn't know what to do with it. I did what most people do. Checked my phone. Tried to force myself back to sleep. Counted the hours left before I had to function. Called it insomnia. Thought of it as a malfunction. It took a therapist, and then Jung, to offer a different frame. Before I explain what that frame is, I want to tell you something about what actually happens in your body between 3 and 5 in the morning. Your sleep cycles through the night in roughly 90-minute rotations, moving from deep slow-wave sleep into lighter stages, then into REM. The first half of the night is dominated by deep sleep. The second half, from about 2 in the morning onward, is dominated by REM. The sleep becomes progressively lighter with each cycle. At the same time, around 2 to 3 in the morning, your body begins producing cortisol. This is part of the circadian clock, the hypothalamus signaling the body to prepare for the day. Research has found that the cortisol awakening response reaches its actual peak somewhere around 3:40 to 3:45 in the morning, before you've even opened your eyes. What this means is that the window between 3 and 5 a.m. is biologically a threshold. The deep sleep is behind you. The day hasn't arrived. You're in the lightest, most permeable sleep of the night, at precisely the moment when your body is beginning to rouse. And this, from a Jungian perspective, is not an accident. Jung spent more than 5 decades documenting what the mind does when the conscious ego relaxes its control. His conclusion, written in Volume 8 of his collected works and reiterated throughout his clinical practice, was precise. Psychic activity wells up wherever the inhibitive action of the conscious mind abates, or, as in sleep, ceases altogether. All day the conscious mind manages. It selects what's relevant, suppresses what's inconvenient, organizes experience into a version of ourselves we can present and maintain. The psyche runs a constant editorial process, deciding without asking us what surfaces and what stays down. Sleep interrupts the editor. And in the lightest stages of sleep, the ones that cluster between 3 and 5 a.m., that interruption is the most complete. The dreams you have in this window tend to be the most vivid and the most emotionally coherent. Not because they're more meaningful in a mystical sense, but because the REM phase processes emotional memory at a different depth than waking cognition. Whatever you've been carrying that couldn't surface during the day has the most room in these hours. Jung called this the compensatory function of the unconscious. The psyche adjusts. It raises what has been suppressed. It presents an image in feeling, and sometimes in the raw discomfort of an unexplained waking, what the daytime mind has been working too hard to ignore. He wrote, in the practice of psychotherapy, the relation between the conscious mind and the dream is strictly causal, and they interact in the subtlest of ways. Strictly causal, not random, not noise. The specific feeling that surfaces when you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 4 in the morning. The specific thought that arrives when the room is dark and the day hasn't started is in direct relationship to something you have not yet looked at clearly enough. I want to tell you about a man I worked with during my last 2 years in hospice care. He was in his late 70s. Advanced prostate cancer, several months left. His family visited regularly. Everything appeared orderly, and he was, by any observable measure, a man at peace with what was coming. But every night, he told me, he woke up between 3 and 3:30. At first, he tried to get back to sleep. Then he'd stopped trying. He'd started keeping a small notebook on his nightstand. When he woke, he'd write. Not about dying, he said, but about everything else. Things he hadn't said to people, things he'd wanted and hadn't named, even to himself. Things about his marriage, his father, his regrets. But also, he said, things he was grateful for that he'd never told anyone. Gratitude that had sat unsaid for decades, surfacing now in the only hours quiet enough to hold it. By the time I knew him, he had 3 notebooks. He died on a Tuesday in April. His family called me a few months later. They'd found the notebooks while clearing the house. His daughter said, "This is the most honest thing he ever left us. We didn't know he'd thought any of this. We didn't know he'd been this person." That's what 3 in the morning had given him. Not peace, not sleep, access. Jung did not theorize about the liminal hours from a comfortable distance. Between 1913 and 1930, during the years that produced what became the Red Book, Liber Novus, he deliberately and systematically explored the boundary between waking and the unconscious. He would enter states that were neither sleep nor full waking. He would write what emerged, paint it, engage with it directly, as if in dialogue. He wasn't performing a spiritual practice. He was documenting the content that the unconscious presented when the ego withdrew. What he found over 17 years of that work became the foundation of everything he built after it. Not because the images were mystical, because they were honest. The content that emerged in those liminal states, the images, the figures, the unresolved tensions, was precisely the content that the daytime mind, with its ambitions and careful self-management, kept from the surface. The question he asked consistently was not, "What does this mean?" It was, "What does my unconscious know that I haven't yet been willing to look at?" That question, in those hours, is available to you too. Here is what I want to offer you. The next time you wake between 3 and 5 in the morning, not from illness, not from outside disturbance, just awake and unable to return to sleep, resist the first instinct. Don't reach for your phone. Don't narrate it as insomnia and wait for it to pass. Don't try to force yourself back by sheer repetition of "I need to sleep." Lie still, let the room be dark, and ask, quietly, without urgency, "What's here?" Not demanding an answer, not analyzing, just asking with genuine openness, the way Jung asked in those late-night sessions with himself. What arrived? What surfaced in the space between sleep and the day? It might be a feeling without a clear source, an image from a dream you can't quite hold, a thought you've been sidestepping for weeks, arriving now because this is the only hour quiet enough to get through. Write it down if you can. A sentence. A fragment. Not because you need to make sense of it immediately, but because the act of writing signals to the unconscious that you heard it, that you didn't dismiss what it brought. Jung believed the unconscious communicates constantly. It doesn't stop when you're not listening, but it speaks most clearly when the machinery of the day goes offline. 3 in the morning is not a malfunction. It's the hour when the editor sleeps, and if something is waking you in it, consistently at the same hour, with that specific quality of weight or presence, Jung would say, that's not an inconvenience, that's an appointment. The question worth sitting with isn't, how do I stop waking up? It's, what is trying to get through, and what would happen if I finally let it?